Hi everyone, welcome you all. In the today's video, we are going to learn about REST template in Spring Boot. So first of all, let us understand what is REST template and where we can use REST template. And finally, we will see how we can use REST template along with the H2 database to perform integration testing on microservices. Okay. So if I just see what is REST template is used to create applications that consume RESTful web services. So for example, when I have any RESTful web service or REST API, and if you want to test that REST API, so when I call the URL by passing a request, and we will get the response, and we can do some validations on the response. That means we are consuming the API. So for that, we can use a REST template. It is almost similar to the RestAssured. So while testing the API, we use RestAssured framework, right? RestAssured API. Similarly, REST template is also a built-in framework or API which is already available in the Spring Boot. So by using REST template, we can create our applications that consume the RESTful web services. But basically, we use this REST template for integration testing of REST APIs with the database. So normally when you do request REST APIs, what the REST API will do, which will again talk to the service, and the service fetch the data from the database, and the data will be again provided to the consumer, right? This is the actual process will happen. But here we are mainly focusing on the integration testing. So how REST API is talk to the database, how the data is fetching from the database, whether API is properly giving the data from the database or not. So that is the integration part which we are going to test by using REST template. Okay. Now, if I just look at the picture, in our previous videos, we have seen how to write the unit test cases for service layer. And at the time we have mocked the repository layer. And also we have seen how to write the unit test cases for controller. And that time we have mocked the service layer. And also we have mocked the repository layer. So when I writing the unit test cases for the service layer, actually it is not talking to the database. Instead, we have prepared our own mock data, and that data is used as a test data at the time of writing the unit test cases. Now this time what we are going to do is, so we are also we are also conducting the integration testing along with the unit test cases. We should also write the integration test cases. So suppose the controller, we have all the methods, right? So controller methods. So how we can invoke the controller methods when you start the Spring Boot server? When you start the Spring Boot server, we can call the APIs through Postman client or using by any other client, right? But the initial thing is we need to start the Spring Boot server. So once you start the Spring Boot server, and we can request the uh, API. So we can just send the URL, we can get the response. And actually what is happening here is the controller is talking to the service, and the service is again talking to the database through this repository layer, right? So actually the database is a real database here. So in the real database, we have a tables and which contains the data, and that data will be used by the service as well as the controller methods, right? So when you send a request to this controller method through HTTP request, and that will again go to the service layer, and service will get the data from the database. So this we have understood in our previous videos. Now what we are going to do here is, instead of using the real database, we are going to create our own database. Like in our previous video, we have seen about H2 database. What is H2 database? It is a mock kind of database. So while writing the test cases, instead of depending on the original database or real database, we can create our own local database. That means we can create the database only for unit testing or for integration testing. So that is H2 database. So we create a H2 database for testing purpose. And then what we will do is we will try to invoke the controller methods and through HTTP request only. So this time we are going to write the integration test cases for HTTP request. So whether HTTP request, when you send this request, whether it is properly going to the database or not, and database properly giving the response or not. So the integration between the REST API along with the database, that we are going to test. Again, when you send the request, obviously this will hit the controller methods, and controller methods again talk to the service layer will talk to the database. But here the integration testing we are going to do between our HTTP request and database. Again, what is a database? Not the real database. We are going to create our own database. That is a mock database, H2 database we are going to create. Okay. And this is how we can just do the integration testing. Now I'll show you how to write the integration testing or integration test cases for testing the controller method. So that's the reason basically we can call it as REST template is used to create an applications that consume the RESTful web service. Who is consuming the RESTful services? The customers or clients will consume the RESTful web services. That means we will able to access the REST APIs by sending the URLs. And actually REST API will talk to the database and will get the response. And here, instead of using the real database, we are going to use a mock database, that is H2 database. Okay, that's we are going to see now. Now let's go to Eclipse. And this is our Spring Boot project which we have created. Now if I just go back to the project, so in our previous video I have shown you how to set up H2 database, right? So for that, what I have done in the pom.xml, we have added a new dependency for H2 database. After that, in the resources, we have created application.properties. Instead of routing to the real database, a real database is MySQL database, we have created the connection parameters which will connect to the H2 database at the runtime. And after that, in the data.sql, we specify the SQL statements which we are going to execute at the runtime, because we need to have some data in the tables. This configuration we already done. So if you want to take the H2 database connection, we have to run the Spring Boot server every time, right? We have to run the Spring Boot server, and then H2 database will be triggered, and then we can do all kinds of requests. So now what we are going to do is we are going to start the Spring Boot server, because without starting the Spring Boot server, our H2 database cannot be used. So we have to start the Spring Boot server. That's the first thing. And then we already created the controller method. If I just go to the country controller, so based upon the type of request, we have created corresponding methods. So the first method, get countries, get country by ID, right? Get a country by name, add country. So these are the implementation of the REST APIs. These are the implementation part, we can say. But how to consume this? If you want to use this API, we have to send the request and we will get the response, right? So how we can consume that API? So for that, we are going to write a integration test cases. So in the integration test cases, we are going to test these methods by passing the URL. But what is the new thing is here is that request will go to the database. The request will go to the database. So this method internally talk to the service, but the service also directly talk to the database. It can be real database or it can be H2 database. In the application.properties, if you configure the real database, the request will automatically go to the real database and you will get the response from the real database. But if you configure the mock database, H2 database, then you will fetch the data from the H2 database, or it is a mock database. But why this H2 database is required if you have a real database? So the reason is, while writing the unit test cases or while writing the integration testing, you do not have any dependencies, external dependencies like databases, because databases can be accessed by any people from your team. So anybody can do anything on the tables. So sometimes your test cases may be failed if the data is not properly there in your real database. So to avoid those type of problems, what you can do is you can set up your own H2 database within your project, within your test cases. So whenever you start running your test cases, you can just use this H2 database as a mock database, and it works exactly the same as a real database. Okay, and that's the reason we use a mock database, which is H2 database, instead of going to the real database. Now, so here, if you want to use a H2 database again, we have to start the Spring Boot server. And after that, we will write the integration test cases for every controller method. And those test cases will talk to the mock database, which is H2 database, and we will verify the response. Now, by using the REST template, what is the REST template is used for? REST template is used for writing the integration test cases to consume the, or we can say consuming the REST APIs, whatever the implementation is already there in the REST APIs. So if you want to use it, if you want to consume these API services, we can just use a REST template. And here, as a tester, we can use a REST template as a for integration testing. Okay, what is integration means? What again? REST API between the REST API and the database. All right, so now let us start writing the integration test cases for each and every controller method. So for now, I'm not starting the Spring Boot server. But if you want to run the integration test cases, again, we have to start the Spring Boot server. But earlier we have created unit test cases, right? So while executing the unit test cases, we don't need to run the Spring Boot server. Without running on Spring Boot server, we are able to run all the unit test cases because we have mocked it. We are not depending on real database, or we are not depending on the server. But this time we are doing the integration testing. So we have to start the Spring Boot application server so that the database will up and running, and your API request will able to call through the URL. Okay. Now, so let us start writing the integration test cases. So for that, this is my Spring Boot application. So the main class, if you start running this, this will automatically start the Spring Boot server. So for now, I'm just stopping. It is keep on running. And then this is a controller method. So let us start writing the integration test cases for controller methods by using a REST template. Okay. So for that, what you have to do is, as a first step, let's go to our SRC test Java. And inside the package, we are all creating the test cases, right? So this time I'm going to create a new class. I'll name it as controller integration test cases. Okay, controller integration tests. Click on the finish. So now here we need to write. So before writing the test cases, we need to add a few number of annotations for this class. So the first one is we need to specify Spring Boot test. So this is a Spring Boot test that we need to specify. Spring Boot test annotation. Okay, Spring Boot test annotation, which we have to specify. Now import this. So Spring Boot test is imported. Okay, after that we need to also add a few more, because I'm just going to write a JUnit test cases. So if we want to run them in proper order, so we have to add one more annotation called @test method order. Okay, so test method order, and here we have to specify something called order annotation dot class. Order annotation dot class. Okay, now we need to import this. Okay, so apart from that, so now apart from that, we need to create test methods here, integration test methods, and each method we have to specify with the @test annotation. Okay, so let me just write one test method for now. So I'll say void, I'll name it as get all countries integration test method. So whenever you say a test method, what you have to do is we have to specify with the @test annotation. Along with that, I'm also specifying the order, in which order I want to execute. So I'm just specifying one here. Import the test from org.junit.jupyter.api, and order we have to import from org.junit.jupyter.api. So now let's see how we can implement this. So here, when you call the controller method get countries, internally this will go and ask the service to provide the details. Again, service will talk to the database and get the data. But here we already configured the H2 database in our project, right? So to use a H2 database or to perform integration testing, we have to trigger this URL, and then this method will be called. So how to trigger this URL? So here we have to use something called REST template. So let me just try to use REST template. For that, we need to create a variable called REST template. We have to instantiate it equal to new REST template. So now import this REST template. It is just like a RestAssured. So here this is a Spring Boot framework. Internally it is available. So it is REST template is a object equal to new REST template. Now what you have to do is through this template, we can send the request and we'll get the response, and we will do validations on the response. Okay. But how to send the request? So get all countries integration means we have to send the request. Now, if I go to the Postman tool, so this is our request, right? So this is a request which we have to send HTTP request to get all the countries which are available in the database. So how to send this get request? Through REST template. So for that, we can take this object REST template dot, there is a method called get for entry. Get for entry is a method. So by using this method, we can send all kinds of requests. So especially get request, we will send by using get for entry. So this will take two arguments. The one is URL that we have to send, and whichever URL we send through Postman, so the same URL we can use, because this URL, that HTTP request URL, will get the data. And what is the second parameter is, when you send this URL, we'll get the response, right? And that I am taking in the string format. That means we have to specify the type. So by default, I'm taking as a string.class, actually in the JSON format, but JSON also we are representing in the string format. So string.class I specified. So what this statement will do is, through the REST template object, I'm sending the GET request, and this will give you some response. So what is the type of the response here? The type of the response is, if I just look at here, this will return response entity which will return. So that is the return type of this response entity of the string. Now import the response entity from org spring framework.http. Now from this response, now we can get the status code, body, everything we can get it, and we can do validations on them. So let me just print the status code and status body, what you will get. So system.out.println, and here how to capture the status code, I say response dot get status code. It is just a status code, response dot get a status code. This will return the HTTP status code. Similarly, if you want to print the body, then you can simply say response dot get body, response dot get body. So this will return the body. But I want to verify something in the body. So what we need to verify? So we need to add some assertion. What is an expected? What is an actual? So before that, we need to specify something what we are expecting from this response. When you send the response, so this is a when you send this request, we are expecting this is the response. And if I just look at our H2 database, SQL, what are the statements we have created? So these are the two records we created. So one is Delhi, India, Washington, USA. These are the only two records I have. So at the time of getting the countries from the database, only these are the two records will be returned. So these two records we are expecting. So go to the test case, unit test case, and here specify what you are expecting in the response. So let's take a string expected, a variable, and whatever you are expecting in this body, just copy that response and you need to validate it. Okay, so inside the double quotations you can keep this one. So this is all actually JSON response, and you can just ignore the slash and everything. So this is a format, and finally this is exactly the same as this one, this JSON format. Okay, now this is expected from the response, right? So then we have to do some validation, especially when you do validations on the JSON, and the same thing we are expecting from the body also. So here we have a special assertion called JSON assertion. So we can say JSON assert dot, we have a method called assert equals, and here we have to pass what we are expecting, and response dot get body will give you the body, right? So that we are verifying with, we are comparing with this body with our expected. And what is the third parameter is strict or not. This is basically strict parameter. What is that strict means? Whether we need to compare these two parameters exactly the same by ignoring the spaces or considering the spaces, that we are specifying. So we can just make it as a false for now, because I don't need to consider any spaces. I need only verify the data is correct or not. So this is a JSON assertion that we need to install. We need to throw some exception, add those declaration we need to add. So this is a one assertion. If you want to add another assertions, JUnit assertions, you can add on the status code and get body. Okay. So now we have created one integration test case for get all countries. Okay. By using REST template, and internally which database it will use when I do this request. So you can just see request URL we specified anyway. So when you send this request, it will redirect to your H2 database, which we created within our project. It will not connect to any external database, real database. Okay. But if you want to start, if you want to test this, if you want to execute this integration test, the Spring Boot server should be started. Okay. Until unless the Spring Boot server is started, we cannot send this URL, right? So now let us start the Spring Boot server and then execute this. So when you start the Spring Boot server, H2 database by default will be created at the runtime, and the records will be table will be created, and records also will be inserted in the table. Now let us go to the Spring Boot server. Let us start this. Run as Spring Boot app. And integration test cases we can do only after starting the Spring Boot server. Now our Spring Boot server is started. Now what we can do, and if I do Postman, so we can request through Postman also by just sending the same URL and just cross check whether you're getting data or not. Yes, you are getting the data from the HTTP database, because if I just go to the application properties, I configure the HTTP database connection details here. So obviously it is going to HTTP database. But now I need to run the integration test cases. Once you start your Spring Boot server, go to the integration test case. You can just close this console. Still your server is up and running. So now I need to run this integration test. So how to run this integration test? You can just right click, run as JUnit test. So now it will start and execute. All right, so now we can just look at here. So my test is got executed. Get all countries integration test is executed and got passed. And you can just see the console window output also. See this, the record found. So because there are some records are there, and how many records we got? Only one and two records. Exactly the same records which we have configured in the H2 database. The same record we got it. So my test is passed because the body is exactly equal what we are expected. So this is how we can just write one integration test case by using the REST template. Here, which type of request we have sent? Get request we have sent. Get request we have sent. So similarly, let us try to automate a few more integration test cases. So the next thing is, let me just copy the same thing. Now this is order 2. So the next one is, so from the country controller, so the next method is get country by ID. So let's create one more method, get country by ID. Go to the integration test cases. Now this is another test I'm going to write. So instead of specifying this, get country by ID, this is the name of the test, get country by ID integration test. So here what you will do is we will pass the ID of the country. So this will return the country data. That's our expected. And this is again get request. Okay, this is again get request. So just forget about this. Now you can just first step what we have to do, we have to create a REST template object. And through that we are sending the get request, and this time we have to pass some other URL. What is that URL? And this is the URL. So when you pass this URL, get countries by ID, so ID is also path parameter. So copy this and then specify the URL, and this is a get request we are sending, and we'll get the response in this variable, right? So once you get the response, again we can print the status code and the body. And if you want to verify the response body, you can verify it. But whatever the response we are getting from the database, that should be equal to our own response. And if I just go to the Postman, actually this is a return, this is a return type, this is a response which we need to verify. So specify one string variable here, string, this is our expected data, in the double quotations, copy the same thing. So this is the data we are expecting. So once you get the response, that response body, you are comparing with our expected data. If both are equal, then my test will pass. So this is another test we have written for get the country by passing the ID. And here also we are sending the get request, and this URLs got changed. So like this, you can do a lot of validations on the response. Once you get the response, we can do different type of validations. Now two test methods I have. So if you want to execute, the first one will get all the countries, second will get the single country. Let's try to execute now. And Spring Boot server, it is already started earlier for the first test case. So still it is running. Now let's go and run as a JUnit test. Okay, now I can just look at here. The first test method got passed and the second got also passed. So now the second one is return this response. This is a response we have just printed in the console window using print statement. So which is printed the response. So this is a one more integration test for get country by ID integration test. Now let me just write another integration test, get country by name. We have another controller method, right? So get country by name integration test. Okay, so here again it is almost the same, and this is a third integration test. And here when you pass the name, so we'll get the country details. So here we have to change the get request. So again, REST template object we have to create, and then we have to call the method called get for entry, because this is also get request. So what is the get request? This is a get request. We have to send this URL localhost 8080 get country / country name question mark name equal to India. This is a filter parameter, query parameter. Now copy this and then specifying the URL, right? So this will give the response here, and printing the status code and get body, right? And also we are checking the expected. So what you are expecting, so when you pass the country name India, so this is the actual data which will return. Country ID is 1, country name is India, capital is Delhi. So the validation point is again same. So status code we are just printing, and response body we are just captured and printed here, and we are comparing the whole response body is exactly equal to our expected. Okay, this is a assertion. This is a country, get country by name integration test. Now let us try to execute all three. So once you start your Spring Boot server, it keep on running. So until unless you stop the server, it keep on running. So we can keep on automate the new integration test cases. All right, so now it is all executed, all three tests. You can just look at here. So this is the first one, second, and the third one. All are got passed. So all three are get requests we have seen. So get all countries, and get country by ID, get country by name. So where exactly this API is fetching the data? From the H2 database. We need to remember that. So we're not dealing with the real database actually here. Instead, we created our own database in our project, Java based database, and the connection is routing to H2 database. Okay. Now, so let us create a few more tests. So in the country controller, so we have few more methods like add country, update country, and delete country. Now let us see how to write the unit test, integration test for these three methods. So again, go to controller integration test cases. Now let us see how to write an integration test for adding a new country. Add a new country. Let's create void add new country integration test. Specify @test annotation, and also I'll specify the order, which is 4. Okay, so now what we need to do here is we are going to add a new country now in the database, right? So for that we need to create one country object. We need a country object. So let's say new country, and two countries already there in my database. So I'm adding one more country. Let's say 3, and let's say Germany, right? So this is name of the country, and then Berlin. Okay, this is a capital. So I'm just storing this object in a variable called country. The type of the variable is country type. So now import this country class from the beans. We already have bean class, right? Country that we have to import. So now this is representing one entry, one data entry. So that we need to add to the database. So we need to add this entry to the database as a new record. So when you add this record to the database through the API, what you will expect as a response? So in the response, just go to the Postman again and see here. When you just send this request with this information, we will expect the body like this, right? We will expect the body like this. Let's copy this JSON body. That is your expectation. So along with this country, let us put the expectation also. String expected equal to, specify that in the double quotations. But here the country name is different. This is Germany and this is a Berlin. So this is the data actually we are expecting. Okay, this is the data we are passing through the request, because we are going to send a post request this time. So when you send the post request, we have to add the request body also along with the post request. So once you get the response should be equal to this one. Okay. Now let us send the post request. So we have seen how to send the get request by using get for entry method. But this time, what is the method we have to use? So to send the post request, we have to use one more method called post for entry method. Get for entry. Similarly, we have a post for entry method. But here we need to do some additional stuff. That is, whenever you send the post request along with the body, along with the request body, we should also pass the type of the body, like what kind of data you are sending, and some headers also we need to add. So for that, what you have to do is, first of all, let me just create a rest template object. And once you create it, we need to also create some headers. So we have a special class called http headers. For that, let me just create one variable called headers equal to new http headers. So this is basically representing headers of the request. So import this. And then we have to specify the type of the data through this header. Okay, so this will also throw some exception. Okay, just a moment. Some incorrect package we have imported actually. So http headers equal to new http headers. So we need to import a right package because this is available in multiple packages. So we have to import from org spring framework.htp, not from java.net.htp. Okay. So there's a package. Now by using this header, we can specify the type of data we are going to send. So headers dot content type we have to specify. So for that, I'll say set content type. Set content type. What kind of type of data we are sending? There's a media type. That is a applications JSON type of data we are sending. So media type dot application. You can see here there are different formats of data. So application underscore JSON I'm selecting. And now when you send a request, we have to send the request body along with the header. Both we have to send. Okay. Now by using this REST template, we have to call a method called, just like a get for entry, we have something called post for entry method. Post for entry. Here we have to pass the three parameters. The first parameter is the URL. If I go back to the Postman again, this is the URL. And headers, we already created a header here, right? We have specified the content type inside the header, that headers. And the third parameter is type. The third parameter is one second. So here we are passing the URL. That's the first parameter. Second parameter is a we have to pass something called body also, right? We have to pass this body along with the request. So that we need to create a separate one. So we have to create separately that before sending the request. So for that, what you have to do is we need to create something called HTTP entry. So we need to create some request because we need to send the URL along with the some request body. So we have to send this body. But from where we will get this body, we have to create something called HTTP entity and request equal to new HTTP entity. And here we have to pass two arguments. One is that country, which is representing the data along with the headers, whatever we created here. So data and headers, both were passing into this request. So now this request type is HTTP entry of country. Country is nothing but the data type. So whatever data we are passing, that type of data is country. Now this is a request we have to pass here. Along with the URL, we have to pass the request. After that, we can specify the string.class. String.class, because this data is in the form of string only. So we are just specifying the type called string.class. Okay, so that's it. So this is a thing which we need to specify. So this is the actual post request. In the post request, what are the different parts we have? The URL and response body, that is your request, and string.class. So here request body or request we are sending in the form of string.class. So once you send this request, it will give you some response, right? That we need to store in some variable called response. What is the type of this response now? The response type is response entity. And in the previous test case also, whenever you call the get for country, the response type is response entity, that we have to specify. So once you get the response, Now we can do the verification. So let me just print the body response.getBody. So this will print the response because we have already added the new country. So whichever country which is added, the same response will be, same data will be displayed. And after that, I want to verify the status code. So previously we are not verified the status code in our previous test, just we have printed. And we have written one assertion to verify the body, response body. So along with this response body, this time we are going to verify, uh, expected is this one, right? So we are going to verify add throws declaration. Along with this body, we are going to verify the status code. And for that, we can write a normal assert equals from JUnit. Assert equals, and here, how to get the status, HTTP status dot created we are expecting. This is we are expecting. So HTTP status we have to import, and this we are expecting. But what is actual status in the response? We have to get from the response itself. Response dot get status code. Get status code. This is the one assertion. So now this status code I am comparing with our my own status code which is created. Now this assert equals is a static import which we need to import from assertion dot assert equals. So now I put one more validation point assertion. This is a add country integration test. All right, so now this is going to add a new entry in the database. And again, our Spring Boot server up and running. So we can just execute all the integration test cases together. We can just run as a JUnit test. Okay, now this time all 4 integration tests will be executed. Now you can just look at this. All of them are got passed. So integration test, all countries, get country by ID, get country by name, add country integration test. So if I just look at the console output also, which country it is added. So this is a new country which is added as a third record. Now in the H2 database, we have a 3 records. First 2 records by default we have added initially. Now the 3 record we have newly added into the database. So now we will see how to update existing record. So for that we need to create one more test. Let's see how we can update. Update in the sense we have to send a put request. We have just added a country which is a post request, and to update the existing country we have to send a put request. So now let us see how we can do the update. Let me just copy the same test. Is a small modification is required, and let me just make it as a update country integration test. Update country integration test. So which country you want to update? So this is a country. Previously this is actual data for third record, but this time I'm changing the country name and a country capital. So third record should be having this country name and country capital. This is a new data which we are going to update. Now after updation, it will send the updated record. So that updated record also we are expecting the same data. So here it should be Japan and here it should be Tokyo. Okay, so this is our expected response. Now again, rest of them are exactly the same. So we have to take the REST template object, headers we have to create and specify the type of data, and then we have to send this body along with the request also, right? For that we need to take another request object which is HTTP entity of country, and here we have to pass country along with the headers. Country object, that means this one we are passing to update the record. Header also we have to pass because header we have configured with the media type, which says the type of data, what kind of data, JSON format we are sending. And this is the one post for entity. So previously when you create the new record, we have sent the post request, but here this time we don't have a put for entity method. If I just look at here, we don't have a put for entity method, just put is there. But even this is not also used. So we have to use something called exchange method. Okay, we have to use something called exchange. So in the exchange, we have to pass the URL first. Let me just get the URL for put request. So third country just now we have added. So third record, we are going to update the record. So copy this URL here. And the request we have to pass, and the string is a class. So this is a parameter. So here uh, exchange is giving an error. So let me just see what is an error. The method exchange will return some different type, because the exchange will not return the response entity. Okay, which will, okay, it returns the response entity only, but the parameters we need to change. So we forgot to pass one parameter actually. So this is just a URL we are passing, but where we specified, which is a put request, we have not specified that, right? So where we have to specify that put request, we have to specify here after passing this URL. Before request, we have to say here, that is http method dot put, like this we have to specify. And after that we have to pass the request, that is a body which we are sending along with the URL request, and then spring dot URL. So this is the whole statement. So RestTemplate.exchange is a method in which we have to specify what is the HTTP method. So why? Because we don't have direct method for put request, like this one, post for entry is there, get for entry is there. Similarly, we don't have a direct method to perform the put request. So we have to use exchange method. Inside this, we have to pass the URL along with the type of request we are sending, and the request which is representing the body, a request body along with this URL will pass, and string type of data we are passing. So this is the response will return. So again, the return type is response entity. So from the response entity, and we can capture the body and we can print that body. And after updation, the new record will be printed in the console window, and still we can verify the status code. So once you updated, the status code is not created. The status code is just okay. Status code we verified, and then expected and response body. So expected is this one, and actual body will be given by this response.getBody method. Okay, this is the assertions we have kept. So this is how we need to write an integration test for update country. So now we can just run this, but previously we already have a 3 records. So add record, add method, this test we already added one new record. The same record will be trying to add one more time if you run the test, because the data is already there in the H2 database. So what we need to do is we need to restart the Spring Boot server to clean up the data, and then it will start from the beginning. Now let me stop the Spring Boot server. So once you stop the Spring Boot server, again restart it. How to start it? Again go to country, again go to the main application, Spring Boot application class, and execute it. Run as Spring Boot app. Okay, once the Spring Boot server started, now H2 database is completely vanished and it is also refreshed. So now let us execute all the integration tests so far we have created. So totally how many tests we have created? So 4, and this is the 5th one. So 5 integration tests we have created. Let me run the unit test, integration test, run as JUnit test. Okay, now we can just look at here. All the test cases got passed. So add countries got passed, update countries also passed. Now if I just look at the console window, previously this is third record, Germany and Berlin is there. Now after updation, the same third record is become Japan and Tokyo. Okay, so in the console window we can see that. So this is how we can write another integration test for put request. Now finally we will see the delete request, how to write another integration test case for delete request. So for the delete request also we can do the same thing. So let me just copy this, and instead of delete country, update country, I'm just changing as a delete country integration test. So which country you want to delete? So I want to delete the same record, third record. So previously this record is updated with which data? Japan and Tokyo, but actual data is different. But Japan and Tokyo we have already updated in the 5th test case. So currently the data is Japan and Tokyo, third record. So the same record I want to delete from the database. So after deletion, which record is got deleted, which will give the response. So this is our expected. So again, create the REST template, and even though it is a delete request, we need to specify the content type and request And here we have to pass the delete request instead of sending the put request. But when you send the delete request, we have to pass this URL, delete country slash 3. So that I'm specifying here. Exchange is the same method which we have to use. And this is a country and this is a request URL. What is the HTTP method we have to send? We have to send, uh, this is a delete request, right? So delete and same request string dot class. This will not change. So once this is deleted the record, the response will be sent here. The response is again same record. Whatever the record is deleted, the same record will be captured in the response. Now I'm printing the body, the response body. Whatever record is deleted, which is printed, but we can just disable this. It doesn't make any sense because already record is deleted, right? So record is deleted. That's it. We cannot get anything else once the deleted. But if you want to check, if you want to put some assertion, then what we can do is we can have to capture the response in some variable. So that's the reason. And I have written this API. After deletion, this will again resend the same record which is got deleted. Now I'm just printing the get body, and here assertion assert equal status is okay, and response code is capturing from the response object comparing with the okay. This is one assertion, JUnit assertion. And if you want to verify the body also, we can just JSON assert equals, and this is our expected body. And here this will return the actual body from the response, and both will compare. So this is a delete country integration test. Now, instead of writing the whole thing for delete, we can also write one single statement. In the REST template, we have a method called delete. REST template dot direct method is available. So just now we have to pass the URL. So with single statement, we can do that. So instead of writing this much of code, we can simply write one statement which will go and delete the record from the database. But this will not return anything for us. It is just returning void. So we cannot do any assertions on this return, because this method is not returning anything. If I return something, we can do some assertions. So that's the reason, instead of using this statement, first we have to create a REST template object. Through the REST template, we are sending this URL and specifying the delete HTTP method, get the response here, and again get the body, verify the status code, and compare the body. So this is how we can just write the integration test for delete country. Now if you run all the test again, so this is a sixth one. If you want to run all the test from the beginning, again we have to stop the Spring Boot server, because the data will be refreshed and vanished after that refreshed. And then let me start the Spring Boot server once again. Go to the Spring Boot application and let me start the Spring Boot server. So once it is started, then we will run all the integration tests. So that's a prerequisite. Whenever you start in executing the integration test cases, you have to start the Spring Boot server. We should not forget that. But rest of the unit test cases, we don't need to run the Spring Boot server. Okay. And one more thing is here, while running the integration test cases, internally it is talking to the H2 database, which is a mock database which we have created within our project, instead of talking to the real database. That we need to remember. So now let me, now Spring Boot server is started. Go to the integration test cases. Now let me run all the test cases, integration test cases. Okay, now you can just look at here. All the integration test cases got passed. Now after deleting the record also, it is just returning the which record is got deleted. Okay, this is the actual data. So we have modified it by using update by sending the put request. Then we have deleted this record. Okay, so this is how we can just write the integration test cases for APIs. And basically what we are testing here, whether our request URL is hitting the database or not, we are getting the proper response or not, we are verifying it. And here, what is the database? Instead of using the real database, we are using the H2 database here. H2 database is a mock database which we created internally in our project. And suppose if you want to execute all the test on real database, so then what we can do is simply go to the application.properties. Instead of enabling this H2 database connection details, you can just comment them and just enable MySQL database. Then automatically all the APIs will be hitting the real database and you will get the response from the real database. But at the time of testing, this is not recommended because this database will be used by multiple members in your team. So anybody can do anything on the database table. So if the data is not properly there, definitely you will run into issues. Your unit test cases or your integration test cases may be failed. So to avoid those type of issues, we can create our own database, which is a mock database. It works exactly the same as real database, and we can run our test cases in our local environment. So here we don't have any uh, chance to get any issues because this is completely our database. So we have created our own queries in the data.sql file. Until unless you modify these statements, so there will not be any issues in the integration test cases. So this is the actual data used by this uh, Spring Boot application, REST template. Okay, so just understand REST template is just like a API testing tool. We can simply say just like a REST assured. So in the REST assured also what you will do, we will send the request, get the response and validate the response. And REST template is also doing the same thing. We are just sending the request and using that REST template object, and we are getting the response and we are validating the response. Simple. But here one more thing is, once you get the response body, we are just comparing with our expected body. But here with this small JSON format, so we have just hard coded this. But actually, if the JSON is very lengthy file or is that is very huge, very lengthy data, but it is very difficult to keep inside the test, right? So instead of doing that, what you will do is we will specify the JSON data in the third party file, like it can be a text file or .json file, whatever it is. And we read that file from that location into some variable, and that variable we can just specify here as part of the validation. So instead of writing the data, expected data inside your test, we can just separate that into a separate file. It can be text file or it can be JSON file, whatever it is, and we can read it through Java code and convert that into string format, and then you can pass it. So that through that approach, we can just avoid to specify this JSON data inside your unit test. That's the best practice or best approach. Okay, so this is how we need to write a integration test cases for Spring Boot application to test the microservices or APIs by using H2 database as a mock database. Okay, so that is all about REST template and H2 database, the combination we have used while writing the unit integration test cases. And make sure whenever you start executing your integration test cases, your Spring Boot server should be started. Otherwise, your integration test cases will not execute. But for unit test cases, whatever we have created earlier, for unit test cases, we don't need to start the Spring Boot application. We can directly run your unit test cases. That is the difference. Okay. So that's all for this video, guys. So thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.